I could go next. All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Avidas, and I'm happy to be here. First, wanted to congratulate you for actually attending today, because as a first generation student or any student who'd like to succeed, being proactive will be your first step. And so I'm a fresh graduate from undergraduate and then going into medical school, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Natalie, do you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I should go next. So good morning, everyone. My name is Natalie. I just graduated from the University of California, Riverside, with a master's of public policy, and I did my undergrad there too. And I'm really proud of going there. And yeah, again, the first gen that's making it and trying to get a job right now, post grad. And yeah, I'm excited to be here with everyone.
Thank you. So I'm going to start by asking questions that have been sent into us for people who are RSVP'd. And then after we get through those, you attendees can send in or ask questions. So our first question is, do college professors help their students get internships or hire their own student assistants?
So they do, and they can help. A lot of times what you'll likely want to do is, one, ask that professor if they know of opportunities, because it's not always that they'll promote those opportunities. The other part is that maybe there's someone who's looking for someone. If you go to them, like to your professor, and you say, hey, I'm thinking about an internship. Like, I was a mass communications major and I want to do radio. Would you happen to know of any opportunities or places that I can look, to get those things done, to get those opportunities essentially? And then sometimes they may refer you to career services. Sometimes they may, let you know of like job boards, if you heard of job boards. So they may be virtual, and in being virtual, they may be able to give you some idea of where to go to look. But I think the biggest way college professors tend to help in getting internships is writing letters of recommendation. So it's important to be a great student, right? It's important to be able to show up and be present and to do what you need to do. So even if opportunities do come up, they can even recommend you and suggest you for things. So it's multi-layered. There's no one answer. It just really depends on the person, the opportunities, the resources that they have, and then also what you're looking for. So be present and be active. That's some of the best advice that I can give you.
Thank you. And also, our fourth panelist is here. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi guys, my name's Kevin. I just graduated from Yale last year with a degree in East Asian Studies. I was born and raised in Miami, went to Miami public schools throughout K through 8, and then I caught a massive break and I was able to go to this boarding school on full financial aid. And then I also went to Yale on full aid. And yeah, it was definitely a pretty wild experience. I mean, at a place like Yale, you have some kids who just got out of Syrian refugee war camps, and then you have third generation legacy kids, and they're all in the same place. So if you guys want to ask about the college experience or anything like that, finding opportunities, I think one of the best things that helped me, just as a quick piece of advice, was finding just those 2 or 3 FGLI students who were a few years ahead of me at those institutions, and they can definitely tell you things that you will not find in a school kind of compiled notebook or set of guidelines. Just tips about personal finance, or even, hey, here's how you can leverage these resources. Oftentimes they're very through the vine, on the down low kind of resources and opportunities that aren't really publicized that much, because although the schools will say oh, we have a bunch of kids on financial aid, the number of kids who are actually on full financial aid tends to still be pretty low. So nice to meet you all. Yes, feel free to ask us any questions. We're here to help.
All right, thank you. If you want, we can move on to the second question. Someone asked, did you include contributions to your cultural or community events in your college applications?
Can you repeat the question for us?
Yes. So someone had asked, did you include contributions to cultural or community events in your area in your college applications?
For me, it feels like it's been forever ago. So, hey, I didn't necessarily cultural, but I did a lot of community service. So I definitely included that just because I knew that it would make a difference. I was able to go to undergrad on a full academic scholarship. And a part of that, and being an honors college was, do you do service regularly? But that really came in handy too, because for those of you who may consider one day joining a fraternity or sorority or any kind of organization where service is a really big part of that, having that history of community service would be helpful. And then again, I'm first generation as a college student and graduate, but I was born, like here. So my mom and everybody else is from the States. And so for me, cultural, it was less that I had something there in terms of like the heritage piece than I had the service piece. And I also went to historically Black college and university. So that also changed for me because I went to a pretty much all Black school for college. And so I was going to be a part of a culture where it was already kind of understood what my Blackness was like. And so when you think about going to college, if you even want to go to a predominantly Hispanic serving institution, predominantly white, all girls, all men, think about those things in terms of what culture is even for you and how you're aligning what you're doing now with going to your institution.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely want to echo that. I've been doing a lot of college consulting these past couple of years. And in fact, it's a bit of a red flag. I'd say it's kind of like an orange flag if you submit an application and you don't have any community service. I think like a lot of colleges nowadays really are looking for that. Community service, I think even more important than giving back to, I mean, those two things they can work together, community service and the cultural aspect. There was a very famous article, I think, on the New York Times where it's like, oh, check this box if you're a good person. And colleges are in their mind actually kind of, I think, still do have a little bit of that sentiment. I would highlight, like, if you're able to talk about how you contribute to your community in a really original or novel or fresh way, like let's say you led like a really cool fundraiser. I'll give you an example. Like I really like breakdancing. So I'll just whip up an example. Like let's say we created like a breakdance event to fundraise for some sort of community service project. They really want to see you're able to showcase kind of like that leadership potential and originality, proactivity, put that all together. So it is important. And I mean, I wrote about something I guess I was more recent. I just wrote about volunteering at a local kindergarten school, pre-K kindergarten school, and reading there twice a week and just talking about how the kids transformed me. So that was something that I'm really passionate about. I like working with kids. So it was really easy essay to write.
I totally agree. And off of what Kevin said, something I did and something I'd advise people to think about is instead of sort of talking about, oh, I volunteered here, this is how many hours I did it for, and these are the achievements or whatever you would want to usually put in, I'd suggest you to sort of find one story, one impactful story, and sort of tell the story, because that'll not only stick with the person who reads it, but also you'd be indirectly telling people how much of a leader you are, how much how much empathy you have in terms of with other people. Instead of you telling people I'm a leader, I'm empathetic, you'd be sort of indirectly sort of getting your point across.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit more to what everyone said. I completely agree with everyone. For me personally, I did add a lot of community service work, but also it depends on each application. I think certain applications have like a section for extracurricular activities too, so you might want to add that there. And I do want to mention, because I know we were saying of different, ways to volunteer, but I know for a lot of high school students right now, because of COVID, it has not been a possibility. So there is opportunities that you might want to do virtually throughout this time, but I think it's more understanding that it's kind of difficult to do that in these times. But also, I know a lot of high school students have gained more responsibilities around the house, that you didn't have to. A lot of people are taking care of, your grandparents or whatnot, or just different ways that you might not think that you want to add to the application, but it is something that is worth saying, because that is another stressor on your academics, and you're helping out in your community. And that's something that should take into account as well. So don't think that's taken for granted if you say, oh, I don't have time for this because I have to do this around the house, or I'm in charge of my little brother and sister, whatever it may be. There's still other things that you can say and show that you're a leader even in your own household. And that's impactful as well, because you just didn't have those opportunities, especially during COVID. I think it's a little bit different, but yeah, volunteer as much as you can. And yeah, even virtually there's some opportunities. I think there's a question for everyone in the comments.
Yes, we'll get to comment questions at the end. Sorry. So I wonder if each of you guys could answer, what are your top 3 points of advice for first generation students who are currently in the process of trying to apply to colleges and getting that done?
One, being in high school, if you have a guidance counselor who's truly an advocate, definitely tapping into them as a resource to help you figure out things like what college would be a good fit for you, what programs, would be something that you want to pursue. Do you want to go far away from home? Do you want to stay close? So help get that person to really guide you. Okay, guidance counselor, let them do their job. The other thing I would say is really think about what you want for yourself too. So that's a part of it, right? Do you want to go away? Do you want to stay close to home? Do you want to go to a big school or small school? Are you sure about what you want to do now? Or do you really want to wait? Is community college an option? So really explore yourself and know that this is one of the first really big decisions you're going to be making for yourself. And it's your decision to make. So this is where the adulting starts, and you get to figure out, what do you want for your life? Really think about that and be okay with what you want for your life. And so that you're happy in what you're pursuing, because life is too short to live with regrets. The third thing I think I'll say is trust yourself, right? Whenever you go to college and, you're thinking about how to show up or who to be, trust yourself and trust that everything that you need, you have within you, that you are extremely resilient and you'll always be able to figure things out. Yes, it will be challenging or difficult sometimes because you are the first, but you are a trailblazer. And so in that, there's nothing that you can't do. And even off the fact of you going to college and having that thought to do it when nobody else has done it, like, it shows a lot about who you are and what you're capable of. So continue to trust that. So those are my few nuggets for you.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight a few things. So when it comes to applying as like a first gen low income student, I think a lot of students feel a little bit, maybe they feel a little bit scared or anxious, but it's actually kind of like a superpower. I think it's harder if you're middle class to apply and get into colleges. Like, the middle class is getting really squeezed, but these colleges are really looking for FGLI students, and they want to bring you into the fold, and they really want people like you. So just know that this is actually a slight competitive advantage. But one of my biggest pieces of advice is to try to avoid cliches as much as possible. Like, I think there's a very common woe is me kind of essay, like, I had a really tough scenario. Focus less on the problem and focus a lot more on the solution, right? Like, I would base your application less on, oh, here are things that have happened to me. You can have some of that, but definitely focus the majority of your application on, here is me making things happen, right? Like, this is me, this is the hand that I was dealt with. Yeah, it wasn't great, but here's how I played my hand. So that's really what I would focus on. And based on what Avitas, I feel like I'm butchering your name, Avitas mentioned, that how you make your application not cliche is by focusing really on the specific moments. Like, I want you guys to use specific, you can make your story. Naturally, the less cliche it's going to sound. So just to reiterate, you can definitely talk a little bit about the problem, but in your essays, less about the problem, less about things happening to you, and more about you making things happen. And I think that really shows like the kind of human being you are.
I'll add one last thing. I agree with what you all said. I think another thing is just don't be afraid to ask for help. If you're not involved in a program that actually helps you out with any application, don't try to do it alone, or just reach out for help, even for the essay or whatever. The more eyes is on, it's better typically. So don't be afraid, and you made it that far, and you just trust yourself. Honestly, you just don't know how long you'll go until you really do that application, and try your best, and you will get to your goal that you want to. So just be trusting in yourself. I think that's a really great comment or suggestion that was made. So yeah, trust yourself and get as many eyes on your application if you can. Yeah, don't be shy about it. If you feel comfortable doing that, I recommend it.
Sort of a personal little story was I moved to the United States during junior year of high school and knew nothing about applying to college. It didn't even come up because I was so focused on getting on track with all my credits in high school and making sure I finish high school on time. What really saved me and what got me into college was resources my school offered, one of which was the Boys and Girls Club. I know this won't be available in all in all high schools, but if you find that your school has resources like this, and most of the time they don't really advertise it, you'd have to ask your advisors whether they have such resources, and if they do, you definitely should join. And if you don't have a resource like that at your school, I'm sure there are many private organizations that could help you beyond what your advisor could tell you.
Thank you. So sort of similar question. We were just talking about, things that you felt were advice that was really helpful for you in getting those resources. If we specifically look at the financial or financial aid side, you also have, if you guys could each answer, like, what resources there do you think were helpful, or would you recommend to other students at this point in time?
For me, go where the money's at if you can help it. And I know that there are a lot of times people who would say, well, no, go to the best school. But what's the best school? Like, you really have to be honest about what opportunities and things are there for you. So for me, I applied to 13 schools. I got into 11. I had scholarships to 8. But I was going where the money was at. Granted, I went to a great school. I went to Shaw University and really loved it. But for me, one of the deciding factors was, are they going to pay for this? Because again, I was first gen low income, and going to school and paying for it was a really big deal. So if you have to go to Alaska because they're offering you a scholarship and you're willing to do it, and it's a great school, spread your wings and go, because it's nothing more refreshing, to be candid, than to graduate and not have student loan debt hanging over your head. So when I finished school, I had a clean slate and I was able to just do what I wanted to. And honestly, of all the education of my bachelor's, my master's, and my doctorate, I've only ever paid for 2 classes. So my thing has always been, go where the money is at. You can figure out the rest. Because being competitive is really about networking and getting with the right people across, institutions. Yes, alumni networks do matter, but in the end of the day, do you want the debt, or do you want the degree? And you can do a little bit of both, right? But you've really got to be mindful of that. So apply for institutions where you do have a great chance of getting money. And how do you know that? What are some of their needs, even if it's from a diversity, perspective, if it's being women, if it's being minority, is being first gen, what does that look like? And really pursue those scholarships that way, because I have no regrets.
Yeah, totally. Going where the money is at is a totally recommended strategy. Like, there are so many different ways, guys, to play this game. So I went from a boarding school. It was really intense. It was, like #1 ranked boarding high school in America. And then I applied to 12 schools. I got into, this is a funny story. I didn't get into like the first 6 or 7. Like, literally, I was preparing for life as a janitor in my parents' Chinese restaurant. I was like, that's it. I got rejected by like 6, 7 schools. And then the last 6 or 7 were all acceptances. So that was really cool. Now, the nature of the game is actually like the more quote unquote prestigious the schools, typically they'll actually have more money for financial aid, low income students. So I was lucky enough where I was actually so broke that Yale paid me to go there. And I made like a couple grand because Yale would give me more money for food and housing and I couldn't spend it all. And then they would let you pocket the change. They don't publicize that. But again, that was a tip that I learned from another FGLI buddy. So that's like that's one approach. I also know friends who are like more middle class in America, from Miami, from like literally my same middle school. They went to community college for 2 years, then transferred to like an insanely awesome school, and then now they're going to law school or medical school. Like that is another really smart and cost efficient approach. So just know that there are a lot of different options out there. Now, when it comes to scholarships, here's another tip that I would share, which is like sit down, create an Excel spreadsheet, and you need to be like really meticulous. I mean, you'll see that a lot of the scholarship essays are pretty much the same thing. They're all just different versions of another, maybe like a 300-word version or a 500 or 650-word version. And so once you start applying and you maybe get like one or two under your belt, it's a snowball effect. Like you'll start to have a lot more confidence, and then you can start pushing for more and more scholarships. I can't come up with like a list right now because it's going to depend on a lot of different things, like your geographical location. It will depend on your ethnicity. It will depend on a lot of different things. But you can create your own list, like an Excel spreadsheet. I've heard of like low-income kids. There was one kid who created a Python program to run scripts, and then he applied to 100 and got like $80,000 in scholarship money. So if you put the work in, like you will find these opportunities, you will find the money, and just kind of once you get those first few under your belt, it really builds a lot of confidence, and you can start leveraging that for even other opportunities.
One thing I'd add is, what does everyone want when they go from high school to college? They want to move out of their home, go get a dorm so they could make friends. What else? They want to go to prestigious universities so they could sort of, just tell their friends that they're going to that university. But as someone who went through the process and, is over with college and university, I tell you that you don't need to dorm to make friends. It's just so easy to join a club and you'll get even more opportunities to meet people. And so I'd say if you have the ability to sort of stay at home and maybe commute a little bit to your university, that's definitely going to save you not only sort of expenses, but also time, right? A lot of food would be pretty much available to you. You don't have to sort of cook anything. And you don't have to clean the house as much, for example. And so that's sort of a tip of, I understand that it's sort of the general popular thing to go somewhere very far. But once you're done with the university, you'll sort of understand that you didn't really need to do any of that to succeed.
I'll go last. So I also commuted, so I understood that idea. I chose, a school where I was close enough and I didn't have to pay, and it wasn't a situation where, I still got money back, which was great because it helped me out for gas and, food that eventually I had to get because I was at school very often. So it is helpful. It is a great option. It's also kind of a similar option to community college in a way that you could stay at home and kind of save up money. And I do recommend it if you know that you want to do graduate school as well, because then it might be helpful in case you don't have that much funding for then, or just preparing for that situation. But again, I'll kind of play devil's advocate and just say, if a school that you really want to go to is a little bit more, then there is you can do it. That's like your dream school. I do say that always because it's once in a lifetime, and then your loans you can always pay back. But yeah, being debt free is really nice. I didn't pay anything for my bachelor's and my master's. The little bit that I did have to pay, I worked it off as a teacher assistant and stuff. So I am also debt free, and it's amazing to feel that way. Well, I have other friends that, did the same program at other schools and like are 80K in debt, but they're also happy in that situation because they know that they'll pay it off eventually and they had a great experience. So it kind of goes both ways. But as for friends, I think we really think about money always. And that's why I think we mainly lean off on that area of, getting the less expensive route. But, whatever makes you happy. But I do think that it's important to think about that just for the future, because you don't know what lies ahead. But any place where you go, it's really what you make of it. That's the corniest thing ever. But I'm the happiest person at the school I went to. I really loved it, and it was really what I made of it, because I saw some friends that didn't get involved or anything, and they just didn't have that experience. Going to class and going home is boring if you don't get involved in something sometimes. So just be involved and you'll be happy wherever, community college to, an Ivy League school, wherever you go, you'll be happy if you get involved and stuff. So, yeah.
Thank you. So this next question, if you can answer it, that's great. So maybe less of a group question, but if you could answer. Someone asked, do you know how college admissions work for non-citizen students?
I don't think there's that big of a difference between non-citizen. I think that I need to double check this, but in the application, they're not going to ask if you're a US citizen. I think they care more about your educational background. The way that college admissions works, guys, is so I went to a boarding school. They're not going to compare me, a boarding school student from New Hampshire, versus another low income kid from California who went to public school. That's not how the game works. They're going to compare you against other people from your pool. So if you went to an international school and you're a non-US citizen, you went to school in Turkey, for instance, and you're applying from there, they're going to compare you to other kids in your region and look at your academic profile and see how you stack up against those people. That's kind of how the nature of the game works. So when it comes to just understand that, I'll give you an example. I've worked with kids from a lot of different places. Let's say you're a low-income student from Texas. Really focus on telling the story of, here was the environment I grew up in. Here's how I leveraged my resources. I think if you can focus on that and talk a little bit about how you're an agent of change, or you're leading in your community, or what you've done with what you've had. Again, I kind of am repeating a little bit, but that's what you want to focus on. I wouldn't focus so much on what other people are doing or what the competition is doing. And I also think that it's not necessarily a bad thing if you're a non-US citizen. If you can talk a little bit about coming to America and these were the challenges, really unique challenges that you had to overcome. And again, talk about how you grew. They're all about personal growth. As long as you can tell that story, I think you guys are in good shape.
Do you want to add something? Because I remembered, it took me a second because it's been a while. But for the federal financial aid assistance, which is called FAFSA, that they do ask you a question, which is for your social, and then if you don't have one, then they require some documents and stuff. But that's pretty much it. But in terms of it going into whether you get accepted or not, don't feel that that's going to be an issue. It's just paperwork stuff that goes into it, and then every school is kind of different. So nationally, it's just different if they ask for it. But I know for financial aid, they do ask for it because it's just part of the requirements and stuff. So, but you'll be fine if you, don't worry that you won't get in because of that situation. But yeah, you'll fill out some paperwork for at least for the financial aid stuff.
Just to add a little bit to that, if you really want to look at a specific school, I wouldn't recommend you doing for all schools. You could check out sort of a breakdown of who the school accepted, what's the percentage of in-state, out-of-state, international, and then you could, if you really wanted to, make a spreadsheet and say, okay, these are the universities that are out-of-state friendly. This is not something most people do. Usually you do this in grad school because you're trying to apply to different states as well. But that's something you could definitely do. If there's a dream school you have, and you want to make sure, oh, do they accept international students, or how do they stack up versus other school? You could find information on their population percentages.
All right, thank you. So our next question, if you guys could all answer this, how did the pandemic create different opportunities or issues for first-gen students, specifically in terms of applications and opportunities and school and all that?
That's a multi-layered question. Because what it means to be first gen, there's so many intersections, right? You have first gens who are athletes, you have first gens who are at community colleges, you have first gens at four-year institutions, first gens who are international. So I think the layer for first gens really depends on like accessibility as well. Are you first gen and low income? Because there were some folks who ended up having to go home in the middle of the pandemic and they had no resources to get on computers to join virtual classes, or maybe they were home and a parent was saying, I need you to take care of your siblings since you're here. The money thing, the financial perspective of it, when, you know, some parents were getting refund checks, they were keeping the checks, you know, and not giving any of the students money. And so just, you know, what did the living situation look like? Was there abuse happening at home? You know, was it conducive to learning? The flip side is it made some first gens really rethink, you know, being at a local community college or a local institution, period. Some people transferred, you know, to be closer because that was the best option, because trying to do online learning may have been a little bit more challenging. I think the other things that happen for a lot of first gens is being able to see opportunities for themselves, period, right? It's just a time for me to challenge myself and to get creative and to think about what I really want for my life. You know, what does the working situation look like? So many layers, right? You know, with athletes, are you losing your scholarship or not? But if you're losing your scholarship in one institution, are you able to go to another institution and still, you know, be able to play a sport there, even if that's not where you were? But I don't think, again, it was similar for a lot of students, first gen or not, but for first gen, some of the layers of the identity of, I don't have a parent to talk to help figure this out. I can't go talk to grandma and say, grandma, this is feeling a little weird to me. What do I do right now? And then being able to get to professors and to, you know, advisors at the time and having to do everything through video. Well, if I don't have internet access at home and I can't get on the bus to go to the library because it's closed, what does that look like for me? But I think that a lot of first gens have really risen to the occasion throughout this pandemic. They've really shown creativity, you know, even more incredible resilience, you know, in who they are, but definitely just being able to say, again, this is why I'm a trailblazer, because I always figured it out, because I have it within me to figure it out, and nothing's going to stop me from getting this degree. So, but we can go on and on about this all day, because the pandemic has definitely challenged us as a global society in a number of ways, but first gens are definitely kicking butt. I'll say that.
Yeah, agreed. There's so many different first gen students. I'll just share a quick anecdote, because last year when the pandemic hit, I was still in university. I was finishing up my last semester as the senior at Yale, and everything was virtual for the last semester. Now, luckily, because everything was virtual, they also made everything pass fail. So that was a pretty chill semester. But from an academic standpoint, from a personal standpoint, I came home. Both my parents work as Chinese restaurant workers, and they both lost their jobs. And so we were stuck at home, and I basically picked up like 2 or 3 different jobs to kind of help pay their bills. And I think sometimes it helps when you're a first gen student to kind of imagine yourself like the main character of your own book. You know, like I was like, I know what part of the book this is. This is like the part where the hero is kind of challenged. Like, what am I going to do? Am I going to let this crush me, or am I going to kind of rise out? Like, what can I do? I think that's also a really good question. And figuring out how to be resilient at the same time, trying to find like an opportunity. I really tried to harness kind of an optimistic point of view and think like half glass full sort of deal. And in fact, in some ways, the pandemic was really beneficial for me and my family, because I ended up starting a tutoring business from like my bedroom. And now that's my full-time job. And I tutor like 30 to 40 hours a week and help other kids like you guys get to where they want to go. So everyone's situation is unique, and like some of the challenges that first gen students are facing are just like so wildly different. Like I said, like I would go on Instagram and I would see people just chilling at home or escaping to like a summer home in like the Hamptons while I was at home like tutoring. So just focus on like, I know I keep saying this, but making the most out of your own situation, trying to find, I think a support network is also really helpful, like talking to other kids who are going through the same thing and figuring out like really realizing that I'm not alone. What are they doing with their time? What can I do? Like, even if it's something as small as sitting down and learning a new course online, right? Like going on Khan Academy or figuring out, learning how to code and trying to make yourself like prepare yourself for the next step. Or like Evangeline was saying as well, being able to think a little bit about like, what are your goals? Like for me, I really wanted to become a teacher. That's always been my dream. And sitting down and thinking about, okay, how do I teach? What would it take for me to become like one of the best teachers? Like what qualities do they have? How can I get a little bit closer to my goal? And creating a bit of an action plan. It's kind of like more of a personal angle. I don't know how to generalize this answer. I don't even think we can. But I think finding opportunities in the face of resilience, I mean, that's what FGLI kids do. So just know that you're not alone, finding a support system, working together towards this common goal of trying to better yourself. I think that goes a long way if you're able to do it consistently.
So first generation students sort of accept the fact that our parents won't understand a lot of what we do. They won't understand why you're putting so many hours into studying. Why are you picking up free internships? Why not work instead? Why? So they don't understand. But in the face of the pandemic, now we also have to sort of explain all of this. We used to say, oh, don't worry about it. I'm getting the work done, and you could sort of go to your library or to your school and do your work there. But as they see you more and more at home, you'll start to have to explain in greater detail why is it that you're actually studying, and sort of showing them, because they won't believe you. They'll want to check your screen to check whether you're actually studying. And so there's a lot of distractions that creates, as well as other types of distractions that working from home creates. And I agree with the fact that having something like a library or somewhere that is far away from all the noise is something students would really need. And that is one of the hardest things that we'd have to deal with this pandemic situation. But yeah, everything, if something is enough of a problem, you could find a solution to it. For example, me, I was trying to study for the MCAT, which is the exam you have to take to get into medical school. And my house was so loud that I couldn't really study there. But this was exactly when everything was closed, even libraries. And so I invested in sort of like earmuffs, construction grade earmuffs that would stop any noise from getting through. And I sort of designated a little corner where I would sort of sit at, and doing that and sort of explaining to my parents and siblings that I really need to do this and you have to trust me and understand, was a big challenge, but it all worked out.
Congratulations. That's a great idea, and how you turned that around. Perfect example. I agree with everyone said. And I just want to say also, because it reminded me of like the MCAT, and at least for California, there's this test called the SAT, and I know other institutions did stuff similar. Although the SAT, so basically, one of the tests you have to take to apply for certain schools was taken away, not necessarily because of COVID, actually. They've been trying to take it away because of a lack of equity, because, students that have parents that have had an education before typically have the funding to have great tutoring and all that for that specific test. And, that's why a lot of complaints are like for first gen, exactly that don't get great results because of that, because they don't have that extra tutoring or time or funding for those tests. But certain admission tests were revoked, or you don't have to take them anymore. So that's like a positive that came out of it for some students, because they didn't have to have that stress anymore. It became optional. So things like that were positive for COVID for some students. And I know there's other issues of like taking the MCAT or the LSAT, which is the test you have to take for law school, at home. And it's like, it's a difficult situation because everything's all virtual, and it's just not an ideal situation. But I think everyone either, learned how to study virtually. There's different methods. You have to get up and, just different methods that you have to take to stay focused, which I think there's one question like that, but staying focused during a pandemic, because I think everyone struggled with that, a lot of folks. But I think just, again, being first gen, there's certain difficulties that come with it, but that makes us stronger, I think. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
All right, thank you. Before we go to the next question, if you could put any questions that you feel like have not been asked in the chat as we go through some other questions we've gotten in the chat earlier today. So, our next question is, are there any valuable online resources that you would recommend that people at this session or other people could reference more, like a golden book for first gen students who might be looking for some easier, accessible help? Dr. Eve, if you'd like to start that off, if you could.
For sure. Well, one of my favorite resources is the Empowering First Generation College Students group. It's a group that's on Facebook, and there are probably about 7,000 people in it now. I've been in it long enough to, I think I was in it when there was about 500. But I say that to say it's one of those places you can go and you can ask questions. There are, literature and popular culture. If you're thinking about something with school, right? How to do things, or, hey, is anybody in here at Yale? I have a question. I want to ask a question, and people can come and give you feedback. So I think that's definitely one resource that I really lean into. You've got SparkED, like this is a resource, going to the workshops, going to the webinars, being a part of the conferences, being engaged in these conversations to be able to get further resources. In terms of books, there are some that are really escaping me right now because I've seen quite a few, but I can put together a reference list and send them over for those who are first generation students. Mine are typically targeted to first generation college students who are like, you're currently a student, and those who've graduated. So mine probably wouldn't be so much as helpful. Other resources, there are podcasts. If you've heard of How to College or How to First Gen, it's a really amazing podcast by a group of first generation students who are doing all things to help high school and college students to just navigate the first gen identity. And again, I'm sure there are other things that is just totally escaping me right now because there's so much. Global Minded is another one. It's a nonprofit that works in leadership for first gens. So I'll reshare these things in the chat for you because I know you're probably like, what did she say? So I'll just share it again. But thinking to get Global Minded, How to First Gen podcast. There are books out there, but the Empowering First Generation College Students group is one of my favorites. And I think that you all would really enjoy that, and just the learning and the support in the community.
Totally. I want to preach slightly different method, but they're connected, which is to find one or two people and really go deep in that relationship. One or two people who ideally it's actually someone who maybe had just gone through the college process not so long ago themselves, but it could be someone a bit older. I'm really lucky, like I had an older sister and she helped me a lot. So I didn't have to go through the classic like first gen struggle. I can't read the forms. I was just like, hey, what do these forms say? She'd been through this, so I leveraged her. But finding one person who kind of understands your scenario and can help you over a bit more of an extended period, maybe can read your essays, can double check things like that, let you know about opportunities. I think that having one person by your side like really does make a world of a difference. There were also kids just at my school who I knew were also first gen, and we were going through the exact same thing, and we would read each other's essays and critique it. and that sort of deal. We would talk about like shared scholarships, and I learned about like summer programs that I didn't know about. So I would say start with your initial like circle of friends, friends of friends, people who are 1 or 2 degrees removed from you. If you don't have anyone like that, then the internet is a really great resource. And there are organizations who are literally trying to pair you with mentors and help you. So there's definitely opportunities for mentorship and for someone to guide you along the process. But also, yeah, the depth of the relationship and having someone who acutely understands your situation and can guide you through, I think sometimes is more beneficial than like, 20 random meetings with people and just kind of getting like a popcorn approach, but sometimes just drilling down and working together might be a little bit more effective.
I agree. There's so many resources. I just wanted to add something because once you do go to that college or university, you will get like a list of, books you need to buy. And if you aren't well connected or don't know, they're really expensive typically. And there's ways of not paying that much or getting it for free online. And the website I put, my ratings, is just one of them that helps you get them for free access. And that's, yeah, there's so many ways to get it for free or rent, or there's just different ways that you shouldn't be paying full price if possible for all your books, because it's going to be so expensive if you do. And again, probably you don't have the funds for that unless you get paid scholarships and you want those brand new books, but it accumulates. And I highly recommend looking for your books online. Typically it helps, and even with the pandemic it's been great because a lot of professors have opted into online versions and stuff, so it's kind of being useful already now. Yeah.
My first step always for everything is YouTube. Not sponsored, just kidding. That is the first thing I check. I totally agree with the Facebook group idea. I was in one myself for getting ready for medical school, and nothing would have helped me as much as that. But how did I find that Facebook group? It was through YouTube videos. When you start something new, you don't even know what you don't know. And so going and searching something vague like first generation experience, for example, could maybe even get Dr. Eve's video if she has any YouTube videos, and then you could from there follow the link to her Facebook group. And so I would say for everything, I as sort of a side job, I do portrait photography, and I used to teach dance, and everything I've done, everything I've learned was through YouTube, and I was able to turn that into either a job thing or support groups. And so I would definitely recommend you to start there and definitely go deeper. Don't just stop at watching a few videos, because that's helpful, but you could get so much more if you go into the details of it.
Thank you. And jumping off what you were just saying, I know at the beginning when Dr. Eve introduced herself, you were talking about how you do, you have the first gen lounge. I was wondering if you could discuss that and what that show's about, and like the benefit you think it specifically brings to first gen students, and how it may differ from other first gen advice sources.
That was so kind of you. Thank you. Because you see, I just kind of skipped over that earlier. So the First Gen Lounge is a podcast. It's currently sitting at 100,000 downloads, and we're in over 85 countries. And it's having conversations about all things life and entrepreneurship. Two of the things I love is let's talk about life and how we figure out our challenges and things that may be struggles, but also let's talk about business. I really love entrepreneurship, and it's not something that I think, talk about enough as first gens, how to, again, continue to support each other. But in this podcast, it's really so many topics. It's mental health, it's getting scholarships, it's navigating family situations, like how to deal with being estranged, or what do you do when a mentor passes. So just really just a nice empowering chat that you can find a little bit of something. But one of the things about doing it, right, is that it's all first generation college graduates. So learning from their perspectives and what they've been through and what they've experienced, and then what advice you can take as you're thinking about, navigating life, and adulthood on your own. One thing I really, really love about most of the people who've been on the show, and I dropped 3 books in the chat. Well, 4, one of them is mine, and 3 from a few others, 2 who've actually been on my show. So those are guides and resources, right? The resources that I've been able to come across. That's why I said there's so many. Just give me a second. But just thinking about, how are we helping each other progress, right? But also finding mentors. A lot of people who've been on the show have also become mentors to others. So for you who are looking for someone who may have a certain, background or skill or interest, if you check them out on the show, even if you don't listen, if you just figure out who they are because you saw something, reach out and say, hey, I saw that you were on this show and I want to make the connection. So it's also building this massive network of first generation college graduates across the world, right? And being able to say, hey, we're here for each other. We support each other. How can I learn from you? And a part of why I did it, it's been about 3 or 4 years now, probably about 4, I'm losing track of time. But it was that when I finished school, I didn't have anybody who was helping me, right? When you're in school, you have all the resources. As an adult, they're like, you're grown now, peace. But it's like, I still needed support. And I was like, so rather than, wait for somebody else to create it, I'll create what I don't see, I'll build it. And the platform that I built, across all the things that I'm doing really started with the podcast and sharing the experiences. So thank you for that question. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. If you did not see, I just put in the chat one of the places you can go and listen to our podcast for those who are interested. So thank you, Dr. Eve. So a question for other one, what skills do you recommend developing at high school and college, or to be able to go throughout university and do the best you can?
So as part of something I did during university was being a tutor and sort of PLA, which is a peer learning assistant for student athletes specifically, but this also applies to any students. And what we did in this peer student learning program was sort of create and sort of guide these students through all the things they would need throughout their college journey. So this included time management, how to email and talk to professors, why office hours is so important, organizing your tasks. And so all of these things, and I would say if you were to sort of focus on one thing, I would tell you to focus on time management and start organizing your time. Because a lot of the time you're gonna have so many opportunities that will present themselves. And if you don't have an organized schedule, you either will hesitate to take that opportunity, or you'll say yes and then find out that it's your cousin's birthday. And then that will make you look very not professional. And, and it's a good habit to start now. So first thing you could do is, if you don't already have it, get Google Calendar. Very easy, free. You could access it anywhere and just start putting in important things. Don't say lunch at 12 p.m. Just put, I have to be at SparkED. I have to be on Zoom at 9 a.m. Central Time, whatever it is. Put the important things. And then if you see that that's a lot of work, focus on even more important things. And if you find that you really like this structured schedule time, you could start adding more to it. There's a lot to learn, and you will sort of learn by yourself, but it's going to be better if you learn from other people's mistakes and advice. And that's where that comes into play as well. Having mentors that have been through it. And like Kevin said, students who've done it, they're a few years ahead of you, and you could sort of ask them what was the most challenging part and go from there.
I'm going to give a slight, maybe controversial answer, but something that has really helped me big time, combining some of the things that Dr. Eva said, Avitas has said, is I religiously studied personal finance and entrepreneurship on YouTube, actually, of all places. And I learned more from YouTube than I did at Yale. straight up, I'll repeat that. Like I learned more about personal finance and entrepreneurship from YouTube than I did at Yale. Now, one of the truths as like a first gen student, I don't think I know any first gen students that did not work in college. Like everybody works in college, but some of the other kids who might be a little bit more wealthy, like actually don't hold jobs. I thought that this was like a mind-boggling change. So the good news is that in college, the way I kind of approached it is I treated it like a video game. I really enjoy games. And I started off like minimum wage. And then I found like another student tech job, which another low-income student recommended. And he was like, hey man, they'll pay you to just sit in a computer lab, make sure things don't burn down and study. And so I kind of started approaching and picking up little gigs here and there. And that really fed into my self-confidence and made me realize like, oh, wow. So there are ways that like I can make money, I can give back, I can also study and, support my family. It's not impossible. That's kind of like the mentality that I was going through. And then while I did that, I would pick up another job as a tutor. And I started off again, just tutoring people for free. But slowly it grew over time. And then at that point in time, I think like a switch kind of went off in my head, and I was thinking about how can I get like world class at this? How can I deliver more value? How can I help more people? And I talked about teaching like just as a thought exercise. Like what would it take for me to become one of the best teachers in the world? What would that look like? How would I get there? And then as you slowly start to develop like your own competitive advantage, it can be anything, guys. Like if you're interested in coding and video games, you can make a game. If you're interested in music, you can combine music with, different passions that you're interested in. And I notice also a lot that a lot of first gen kids end up becoming like entrepreneurs and taking very creative entrepreneurial approaches to problems. So studying those two things, I think part of the reason why it's so important, in my opinion, is because it gives you a massive psychological boost. Like it just tells you that it's not impossible. I can figure this out, right? Like learning about things like retirement and things like that. It's something that I'm really passionate about. And now I go teach other low income students about personal finance and now some of these more fancy like investment, like crypto and things like that. But those are the things that really interest me. And I think we're always thinking about like money as first gen students, figuring, at some point in time, I just remember thinking like, I just want a day where I don't have to think about money. Like that was part of my motivation. I want there to be a day where my parents don't have to think about money. That's kind of what led me to study it. And I found education as kind of like a means to that end. So you can do both at the same time. That was kind of like my unique approach. But yeah, I think that understanding those things just it makes you feel like you're much more grounded and you have kind of a sense of direction. I saw a lot of people nodding, so hopefully I said something smart.
I'll go next. I think, yeah, I agree. I think looking into financial, just getting interested in that is always important, especially for first gen, because we just don't get taught that. It's not really taught in schools. So it's kind of up to us. But again, there's also a lot of programs, typically in college or universities, that teach you certain things, that just isn't taught in high schools and stuff. So reach out to those resources as well. And in general, just my biggest tip is just reach out. And if you're shy, especially virtually, I think it's hard, but talk to your teachers, talk to your professors when you're there. And it's going to be awkward, but we all go through it, and you won't realize like how cool it really is for an assignment or getting you to the next internship, like we talked before, or job posting or something like that. It's just so helpful. I really recommend it. And yeah, most first gen work, and it's totally fine. Like we get through it. It's a struggle, but we're all kind of struggling together in a sense. Just don't feel alone. And yeah, just look at that end goal, and it'll keep you going.
Thank you. So our last question today is if you could each give one word to sum up your experience as a first generation student.
Transformational. I would not be who I am if I did not go to college. No doubt about it. I'd probably still be living in a low income neighborhood, but transformational. That's the one word, but it's so much with transformational. I'll hush.
I'll pick a word that Dr. Eve mentioned earlier, which was resilient. And I think that, you know, it's really funny because I do see a lot of like wealthier kids who maybe had it a little bit easier. And there was a really crazy story about how one of my friends, basically he went home and his dad criticized him for being soft. And he was like, I wish I was more like you, Kevin, like whatever life throws at you, you can find a way to kind of manage. I never really even saw myself as that way. I was just like surviving, finding ways to get through. I never realized that in a sense, like precisely because of these challenges that I became resilient. For me, it was just, that was the way I was living my life. And so him seeing me from that perspective, and I found myself almost lucky, you know, I found myself wishing, I was thankful for these challenges, and everything has made me into the person that I am. So I would definitely wouldn't be who I am or where I am if it wasn't for these circumstances. So resilient.
I was gonna choose tough because that's the reality of it, honestly. But at the end of the day, I felt like it was very empowering. So that's my word, just because it will make you feel like you can conquer a lot once you get through it all.
I'll go with proactive, proactive, proactive. 3 words. I mean, 1 word, 3 times. As a first generation student, you'll have to take the step. You'll have to take the initiative. No one will come in and say, hey, little brother, I did the scholarship, you should do it too. Or you should apply to this college because of this. You will have to search for everything. You'll have to ask the questions. You'll have to find the people who will be able to answer your questions. So proactive.
All right. Thank you once again to our panelists for speaking to us. Give them a little round of applause. And thank you everyone for showing up. If you could turn on your camera so we can take a group photo really quick.
Look at these beautiful faces has been hiding the whole time. Really, guys and gals? What? I'm in the South.
All right. If this is ever... All right. We're about to take the screenshot. So this is the last call for turning on your cameras for this. Okay. I'm going to count down. So 3, 2, 1. All right. I think I should have that. Pari, do you want to take one as well, just real quick to make sure?
Yeah, I got one. And I think just really quickly, we can kind of transition into our next next session. So basically, thank you so much for the panelists for speaking. I think I definitely learned a lot, even though I'm not a first-gen student. So it was informative all around. We will be sharing this recording with attendees after this conference, and we will also be having a blog post about this event, including all the resources that people shared and kind of just sharing important learnings and just important things to take away from this event. So we can just share this with everyone, and who all needs to just for people who can like benefit from this. So yeah, thank you so much, and we'll love to keep in touch with all the panelists. Really quickly, I'm going to share my screen to just let everyone know that we have a feedback survey and that we have these resources if you're interested in joining our team. We will be sharing the recording with everyone who fills out the feedback survey. So we have an account of who all attended and who all wants the recording. So if you would like a recording, please fill up a survey that I can put in the chat. We will be transitioning to a brief just overview of one of our partners, Futurum. So you can stay tuned for that in a minute. So here are the links in the chat. Again, thank you so much, panelists, for sharing your journey, sharing your insights. And if there's any questions that attendees have, you guys can feel free to contact these panelists. They're tagged on our Instagram, so if that's a mode you want to reach out to them from, or email, we can share that with you if needed. But yeah, thank you so much. Neha, do you want to give a brief intro of Futurum, and then we can have Miss Lindsay speak?
Yeah, sure. Could you share your screen, the partnership slide?
Yeah.
So hi, everyone. My name's Neha, and I'm the Director of Outreach here at SparkED. I'm going to put a link in chat really quick, and it has kind of all of the hyperlinks to the partnerships that SparkED's done. Oh, Pari, the next slide. And so here are some of our partners so far. Our partners at Spark range from people who we've done Instagram takeovers with to people we've collaborated with articles for and created syllabi for. So specifically one of our partners, Futurum, they're here today to talk a little bit about our partnership with them. And I'll turn it over to Karen Lindsay. She is the co-founder with Futurum. Take it away.
Yeah, Miss Lindsay, would you like me to share the slides, or do you want to share the slides? Oh, I think you're muted.
Thank you so much for inviting me here today. Yeah, I think it'll be easier if I shared my screen. And
okay.
I'll be able... Can you enable? It says I'm not able to do it. Can you find enable?
Okay, is it enabled now?
Oh, that's great.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, everyone.